All right, welcome everyone to the Solana Community Validator discussion, July 20th, 2023. Talking about a few things today. So first of all, some updates, Validator updates. Quick recap of the educational workshop that happened just yesterday. And then, the normal question if people have topics for the next one. We're going to talk a bit about the two validator tracks at Breakpoint, MEV Camp and Block 0. And then some thoughts about InfraCon, a conference that I went to along with a couple other validators and operators in the community. Just some thoughts and takeaways from that, and then give the floor to Michael from Laine to talk a bit more about it as well. All right, let's get going. So first of all, Mainnet beta, the recommended version is 1.14.20. The key thing to be aware of right now is that the feature for UD, etc. here is going to be activated soon. You could see on the feature schedule in the Solana wiki, feature activation schedule. Let's see here. Here's the pending Mainnet beta activations. It looks like this was the next one up. The min version here is 1.14.18. I think most validators now are up to at least that version, but RPC operators have not quite gotten there. So if you operate RPC infrastructure, please make sure to upgrade to at least 1.14.18 as soon as possible, so we can keep the feature activation schedule moving and keep progressing towards the 1.16 release, right? Because we need to get all these features activated before we can roll out 1.16 on mainnet. And again, for anyone who's curious, you can always check the activation schedule here in this wiki. It's in the Solana Labs GitHub repo. Maximize this again. Nothing too different on testnet. 1.16.4 is the recommended version. Just like before with the 1.16 release, reminder that Solana sys-turner is removed. So you want to do manual tuning of your system, and that's in the docs. So you can check out the validator docs on system tuning. Also, another difference is the calculate accounts hash cache folder is no longer necessary. It's been moved somewhere else in the 1.16 version. So you can just remove this folder if you've got it in your ledger directory. Any questions about those updates? Check the comments here. Okay. Yeah, so the educational workshop happened yesterday. It was on the backup validator setup, having essentially a hot spare to fail over to in the case of an upgrade or any sort of hardware failures or any kind of failures really that you want a backup for. I think the workshop went well, and a big thanks to Blake from Pumpkin Pool for providing the essentially what I worked off of was his notes and his video on how to set it up. So again, thanks to Blake. Any suggestions or ideas for future topics would be greatly appreciated. So the next one's going to be August 23rd at the same time, 1700 UTC. And yeah, I'm just looking for, anything that you think would either be useful to learn for yourself or something that people tend to ask a lot in Discord, and you think it would be good to have some content to cover that. So either one would be helpful. Or, of course, anyone who wants to lead one would love to have somebody else lead one of these that's not me. There's a question about why removing the sys-turner from back here. I think the reason for that was mainly that it was, a lot of technical burden to keep it working properly, and that it's just easier for operators to tune manually. It's just a simple update to the docs if something new has to change there, but it's potentially a bunch of code changes that have to happen to get it to work properly in all configs. So I think that was the main reason. Any follow-alongs to that, Mr. Smith, in the comments? Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's been removed, but the sys tuning instructions I think are pretty straightforward. So it's like 3 or 4 things that you have to tune and then you're done. Okay, moving on to Breakpoint. So Breakpoint 2023 is coming up in Amsterdam. It will be October 30th to November 3rd, but actually it should just be October 29th. So MEV Camp is happening on the 29th, and Block 0, the Validator specific conference, is happening on the 30th. Both events I think are going to be great. Block 0 is really like an event focused on validator operators and this community. So I'd love to see as many people there as possible. A little more detail on Block 0. So it'll be free to attend for anyone. A Breakpoint ticket is not required. And that's because of sponsors. So if you're interested in sponsoring, if you want to help support this event, you can email Brian at jito.wtf and check out more details here. So I'll put this in the chat. But details and information about the conference are all here. October 30th, it's free to register here. They're still looking, as far as I know, for speakers and for topics to discuss. So if you have a specific topic or format that you'd like to propose, again, reach out to Brian would be the best way to get it started. If you've got a talk that you want to give, also reach out to Brian. So all that info should be in here. If there's anyone on the call that wants to add anything, feel free. Nope. But yeah, I'm excited. I think it'll be a great event, and I think it'll really highlight a lot of what's going on in the validator community. So it should be really awesome. Let me put that link in the chat. Any questions on that? Okay, I want to sort of recap a little bit a conference that I went to with some people from the foundation, some validator operators, and just generally people in the Solana community as well as other chains. So I think it was kind of informally called Infra. It was a conference in Vienna, Austria around July 5th. Pretty small conference, but I think it was really interesting, really good format. It was not just Solana specific, but also people from Ethereum and Cosmos and other ecosystems all came together and talked about issues faced by the validator community, issues faced by the infrastructure data center, infrastructure provider community, and then also from a foundation point of view. So kind of all the people who are operating at this layer and what things they're thinking about, what they're working on, and what issues they see in their ecosystem. So one thing I really took away from the conference was that Solana's technology and the progress that's been made over the last 6 months to a year is really not talked about a lot. And maybe not so much in the Solana ecosystem, but more broadly. Like, I don't think a lot of people who look at other chains really understand how quick stake-weighted QoS and fee markets have really made Solana super performant and reliable, even in conditions where there's lots of traffic, like mints, like the Mad Labs mint, for example, really didn't affect the validators at all. And if you go back maybe a year or more, big mints like that could have really hurt the network. So I just want to mention that as something that we should all think about and we should all try to talk about and promote more. And especially when you're talking to people from, other ecosystems, other chains who may not be as aware of Solana and what's going on, I think it's really good to highlight these things and talk about them as much as we can. Another thing that was really a big topic at this conference was governance. And, we all know that governance on Solana has not been a huge topic or a topic we've focused on as much because just the pace we've been moving at. But I think we're getting it to a point where governance is going to become more and more important and something that we need to think about more. So I'm going to kick it off to Michael from Laine to talk more about his thoughts and what he learned at the conference.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'm not going to talk into too much depth. I just want to give a quick kind of overview of how these conversations are kind of happening and starting to happen. You know, we first started talking about governance a little bit last year, and I think the restarts really led to a lot of that conversation, talking about kind of how do we decide optimistic slots and that kind of stuff. But more broadly, obviously, we don't want to have restarts all the time. That shouldn't be the main reason for governance. But with Firedancer coming out, Jito Solana, potentially other clients being built, and the maturity that the chain is starting to achieve, there's more and more conversation that's kind of taking place that we need a more structured and formal governance process. And when I talk about governance, I'm not talking about like the regulatory side or anything like that, but purely how do we make decisions? Decisions about feature activations, new developments, those types of things, potentially slashing, implementing slashing. All these types of decisions should be subject to governance. So right now there is a very limited governance functionality that does exist on chain. It's only been used, I think, once before to activate inflation. And I say limited because you can, you know, you use a command line and you vote by sending tokens to an address, and all you can do is say yes. You can't really explicitly say no, other than just not voting. And there's not that much kind of usage of it or transparency of how it works, anything of that sort. So with Validator Day coming up at Breakpoint, it seems like a great opportunity to kind of kick off that discussion and try and come up with a bit more of a kind of framework for what we think governance should be, with the goal of you know, having a more structured conversation at Validator Day to kind of see what form of governance we want to see on Solana, and then eventually implementing that. So to that end, as Tim mentioned, a few of us were in Vienna, so we had some conversations there. And I think we've had some conversations on Chris's call, the community-led validator, or community call, whatever you want to call it. So I've created a Telegram group just before this call, where basically anyone who's interested in this conversation can jump on, and I'm going to kind of use that to try and gather people's inputs and opinions, and then we can, from there, kind of maybe have some Google Meets, like similar to this type of call, to try and frame, like develop a framework. And yeah, so like Vienna, you know, was interesting because Cosmos was there, and they have a very mature governance stack. So it was interesting learning from them on how they do governance, for instance. And someone from their foundation was also, you know, interested in having more conversations with us around that, helping us learn about it. So I think that's just kind of where we're at. So we're trying to kick off this conversation, create more structured spaces for it, and yeah, try to get something together by Validator Day. All of this is just kind of, you know, brainstorming. Nothing is decided or binding. Obviously, that would all have to be a governance vote itself. Yeah, so I'll just put the link in the chat, and we'll kind of, in the coming weeks, start having more of these conversations.
This is more a sort of meta conversation that's on top of my mind, but would the validator call be a useful place to do these types of discussions, or do you think it'd be better in a separate call?
Potentially. I just wonder if, I don't know yet how deep or involved those conversations would be. Like,
yeah.
You know, if that's an hour-long conversation, then it would kind of cannibalize the validator call.
Yeah, that's fair.
But we kind of, I think the first call would probably only be in like a month or so, once we have a bit more content and specific things to cover.
Yeah. Yeah, Zentetsu said Validator call to introduce topics and coordinate follow-up meetings. I think that's great. You know, I don't know if everyone saw the messages in MB planning, but I'm just wondering more ways to get more out of this call and make it more useful for people. So if you have ideas or if you think frequencies should change or anything should change, I'm leaning pretty hard towards making the call just one time and then, you know, making that time hopefully the most optimal time for people who are interested and want to join. But we'll see other ways to hopefully improve the call. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
First of all, Michael, thank you very much for your comments about how we should start to progress governance. Governance, even in centralized organizations, is difficult, but in decentralized organizations, it's incredibly tough. So I think there's a lot of merit in making the sort of approaching it in the way that you've described. However, I also think that at some point that really does need to wash across this sort of forum, so that how Solana governance is managed becomes very much the sort of the subject of this. And as Antetso has suggested, then I think any governance group or structure, whatever evolves, would feed into this forum and be very much a subject of it. Just while I'm on, I'll just comment on Tim's point about timing of a call. I think to have done what we have been doing, which is the two calls, has been a great initiative, but challenging. But ultimately, I think having one call that is always at a consistent time is probably one of the most obvious routes for getting really high attendance. So all the best with that.
Yep, thanks. I think good points. Zan, do you have some?
Yeah, I just want to say, maybe I'm repeating what's already been said. First of all, I really appreciate the initiative that Michael Hubbard is taking here, but I would hope that we can utilize already existing meetings that we have instead of creating more and different avenues for having, meetings and sort of like bifurcating our attention. I feel like this meeting that we're having is exactly the right place to, if not, of course, we can't hammer out every detail in the time we have available for this call, but I think this is a great place to have the central coordination of when we're going to have a follow-up meeting for something more specific. That's what I would hope we would do.
Yeah, I worry a bit that people treat this meeting as a place where they can't talk as much, and then more talking happens in other places, and it seems like this is a space for people to use. And if we just need to like talk through something for 20 minutes, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's a great use of the time.
Yeah.
Well, if there's anybody if there's anybody that feels that they can't talk in this meeting, I would like to understand why. If some of us are just too loud, I'm certainly happy to try to tone myself down, but I hope everyone feels, invited to speak here.
Yeah, I hope so too.
On the I absolutely, I do think that those conversations should happen here too. I was more referring to, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I kind of see some of these conversations being kind of really detailed and maybe a little difficult to hammer out kind of where the kind of community consensus stands. And if that's an hour-and-a-half long conversation on like what voting options should exist for on-chain governance, between yes, no, abstention, no with veto, different types of things, is that too detailed to have on this type of call? But absolutely, whatever kind of is discussed in those forums should be brought back here. And I think this type of call, as well as Chris's community call, are places where we have to surface this and keep drawing attention to it, because we absolutely want everyone to be involved in this conversation. Because if just 5 people say, like, look, this is what governance is, that's not really how it works.
Mike, did you still have a point to make? Or is your hand just still up? Oh, okay.
My fault. Hand was still up, but I wouldn't mind commenting on Michael's point. I think and this will sound horrible, but I think there's something I'll call it called collective incompetence. In other words, when there's more and more and more people involved, it just takes longer and longer to achieve consensus, to discuss things and to agree things, which is why, again, from previous experience, there's a lot of merit in a group that's prepared to put in the work, because there is a lot of work in this, and to begin to, I call it, collect ideas, formulate ideas, and present, I call it, some sort of considered approaches to this, some, be it frameworks or papers or whatever it would need to be, so that it then can be freely discussed. Totally agree. It's got to be open to all the stakeholders, and identifying who they are and ensuring we get all their inputs is absolutely vitally important. But yeah, I don't think it's just a free-for-all, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think it'll be a hard balance to, make it inclusive, but also like get something done. Soulblade says, I like the concept of validator call being used to give updates on versioning, validator related announcements from Labs Foundation, in case time needs to be filled, but for more detailed discussions, it can help to have those more concentrated towards a smaller group of people who are more interested in having those discussions. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, sorry, Zan. One just quick point there. I think the key thing is that like anything we discuss would be helpful to bring it back to the call and make it available to anyone who's maybe not doing the work to really be getting into the nitty-gritty detail, but like wants to be informed. Yeah, Zentetsu, go ahead.
Yeah, I also can see the value in, as Michael suggested, having a more persistent communication mechanism. He chose a Telegram channel. That's a place, I guess, where people can come into at any time of the day and drop a comment or read comments. So obviously there's value there. I have to say I would really appreciate it being in something like a different Discord forum, the Solana community Discord or something, just because, I mean, personally, I feel like so much of what we do has been centered around Discord. Moving to another whole nother communication channel, I just don't see why, but that's just my feeling about it. That's all I'll say about that. But I do see the value in it. However you do it, however you choose to do it, I do see the value in that.
Yep. Awesome. Anyone else have topics they want to discuss? I'll make sure to put this link in the notes for the call so that people can get to it. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Did I see something from Anatoly talking about tokenomics? It's a sort of question, really.
The question is, you see it on Twitter, or what's the?
Yeah, I saw something, Tim, on Twitter that seemed to invite a group to come together to progress tokenomics in a way that he thought that the foundation probably could not. I just wanted to say that whilst I wouldn't necessarily want to be up for all the, a lot of the effectively sheer hard work that will need to go into it, I certainly would like to be informed, and I'd happy to come up with a few suggestions and ideas, and would be happy to review things if that helps.
Yeah, I think the idea there was that it might have been related to some recent token launches that got some bad Twitter, thoughts. But in general, it's helpful to have more eyes and more review on a token launch, and that's not something that the foundation or labs can really do and participate in. So I think that was the thought, not necessarily protocol specific, but more like if you're a group launching a new token and you want to get some feedback on if the token launch will be valuable or not. Oh, there's a tokenomics Telegram group as well that Soulblaze is mentioning.
Yeah, thanks.
Let me see. Any other hands up there? No. All right. Well, thank you, Michael, for setting up that group, and I will share it. I think one other thing I want to just point out quickly, I'm going to start asking for agenda items for the next call, probably on the Monday before the call. And hopefully that'll kind of just get the community moving and talking a little bit about what we want to see and talk about in the call. I'll also join this governance group, so maybe things from that could be pulled in. Maybe, you know, there's other topics that are interesting at the time, but it'd be great to use this space more for discussions if it makes sense. All right, I think that's all. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for the earlier call, Pacific time.
Thank you.
Thank you.